the clinicians' industry perspective, voices from the US, Europe, and Asia. And I will be joined by two colleagues, Tricia Lacavich. She is Vice President of Clinical Transformation with Fresenius Medical Care. And also by Marjelka Trkulja. She is Senior Director of Nursing with CDI. Thank you both for joining us. When we prepared for this meeting, we thought, why don't we start really by asking you to work a little bit, right? And we thought we could really put some questions for you. Right. And to that end, I would need the, here it is. I will share some slides with you, and you are all invited to answer those questions we have here. So this is about really why is it difficult for clinicians to get involved in research and innovation. And here is a first question for you. Here you see the question, should nurses get involved in research projects? Never. It depends on the research questions studied in the project, and the participation of nurses should be mandatory for all clinical research projects. We'd be really interested, right, in what the audience thinks here. So yes. Please move forward to the slide. So you see the QR code on the top left, just scan it, and hopefully you will be transferred to the Slido page, and I see it should be mandatory. It depends on the research question, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Let's wait for close. Another maybe 10, close, 15 seconds. This is so interesting, right?
I know. Oh, there's no way we're going to be a 50-50 split.
No.
Like right down the middle.
This is really, maybe 5 more seconds, is this okay?
I think we might.
What a surprise to me, at least. What do you think about this answer?
Well, first of all, I'm so glad nobody put never. So thank you for that. I was a little bit nervous for a second up here. I think, listen, I think you couldn't go wrong with either answer, right? But I think that to me, the point of this question is around like the role a nurse will play in a research project. And I think what we know nurses to play that role is the connection to the patient. We all have the greatest ideas in boardrooms and other places, right? Even in like research labs. But the rubber meets the road when you're sitting there taking care of the patient. And I think the nurse can bring a very unique perspective. So I would have voted that it should be mandatory for all clinical research projects. Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm a bit of the different opinion. So I agree with this majority saying it really depends on the question, because we also have to be very clear what do we want to know from the nurses. Not everything needs to be there. Not everything needs to be studied by the nurse. Input can be there, but does she really needs to be involved in that? It's a bit a question of what are we researching. So also, a discussion that we had just prior to this was we need to also be very clear with our expectations. What do we expect? Who should be that one to do the research? The expectation should be clear, and I used AI to help me understand what are we talking when we are talking about leveling and the education levels of the nurses, which is then pretty different. It's not something that we don't know. So the high university level is in 2, 3, up to 15%, depending on the country. So I agree with these results.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. So I think I certainly would also have tended to the first, to the majority vote here. It depends on the research project, but there are many research projects, of course, where the input from nursing staff is just so important. It couldn't be executed without it, right?
That's right.
Okay. What do you think motivates most nurses to do research? Academic purposes, personal goals, application to practice, and improvement of quality of care. What's your thoughts here?
So I think that the answer to this question is highly impacted by the presentation from Lisa just before.
Yeah.
Yes, that's a possibility.
Real true spoken
Mm-hmm.
person about this.
It's such a clear-cut answer.
Yeah.
Any surprises here?
Marjelka can go
Yeah,
first.
for
Go ahead.
me, it's not a big surprise. I think that this is really reflecting not just this audience, but the relevant to the practice that we have. Knowing that the nurses will look at how can we change things that we do? Can we improve something connected to the quality that we are providing and giving to the patient? But in the same time, I believe that a story from colleague Lisa saying about the personal goal that she saw when she understood what the research means, also then reflecting on the quality of care that we are providing, is that kind of mixture that it's usually something that is done. Academical, as I mentioned just earlier, is something that is very tricky. So it's not a big majority that will go for the academical one, but for sure, this personal, when we understand, goes mostly on the quality of care.
Both of you have academic degrees in the science of nursing, right?
Yep.
So I think the academic goal may play a role in some,
For sure.
but apparently only on a very, very small level here.
I think so. I would also say that it might depend on where the person is in their career journey. And I'll tell you like a tiny little story. I would have probably, back at the beginning, I've been a nurse for over 30 years. So back in the beginning, in the beginning of my nursing, I probably would have answered one. I would have said for academic purposes, that's why we do research, right? But at the time, I was working I'm from St. Louis. I was working at St. Louis University. I worked in the cardiac cath lab. We had a whole research division. And so, quite frankly, they were viewed as kind of a pain. Like, I'm in the cardiac cath lab. I'm trying to take care of people and move people through, not unlike a dialysis clinic, very different care, but trying to get people in and out. And we had a study going for a drug called Plavix now. It's an anticoagulant, right? Makes your platelets real slippery for folks that are having an angioplasty and a stent put in. And the paperwork was ridiculous. And I was so annoyed by it, but I did it. But I would have definitely answered number one. Now, funny thing is several years later, my father had an acute MI at the age of 80, and he was on Plavix. And I thought, well, thank God we did that paperwork, because this is one of the medicines that's going to save his life. So today I might answer number three. So I do think I think where the person is in their journey might matter as well.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. But what's really obvious from this response is that the application aspect plays a really paramount role here. That's because I guess it's really the nurses, frontline workers who see most prominently also the shortcomings, who see where there is room for improvement. And because of that, I think I'm not surprised that application to practice, improvement quality of care came first. Yeah.
Yep, agreed.
Okay, let me see what other questions we have. Oh, did you or do you participate in research projects? And you see the numbers here. So, so it's right, did you or are you currently doing? And of course, we appreciate that this is not only nursing staff here. It's a mixture. There are nephrologists, there are technology-orientated colleagues here, there is administrative colleagues here, and so on and so forth. We appreciate that, of course.
Oh, I love that there's a lot more than 10.
Surprises.
I know. I'm a little surprised.
Okay, thank you all. I mean, I'm really surprised by this, by the high number of more than 10 or 2 to 10.
I would completely agree.
I would have lost every bet on that.
Me too. Yeah, I would have as well. I'm shocked, actually. And so I'm pleased, though, because I think that it shows certainly kind of the audience that we have here today. But I think it also shows that folks are a little bit more open-minded I hope. I think people are slightly more open-minded these days around what are some ways and what are some things and some ways we can do to make things a little bit more efficient, right? And so that does kind of move us a little bit more into the AI conversation, but I do think that folks are starting to become a little bit more open-minded around things. Don't get me wrong, we still have lots of nurses out there that can tend to be, a little bit more stuck, right? But I think that I think the more that we can show value to the nurses, that's one of the things I was going to say earlier is there was a great presentation prior to, but I think sometimes what might be missing for a nurse is what's the end result, right? The work I'm doing has to be valuable to me, and so what's the end result of the work I'm doing? Why am I doing it? right? And what's the end result? And so I do think sometimes we could all do a better job, right, of closing the loop for our clinicians in the clinics, whatever that might be. But I think that's an opportunity
I
for
think
us.
actually that's a really important point. The same holds true, by the way, for patients and their relatives. So I remember at RI we would have at least once a year a research day where patients and the relatives and staff was invited just to see what was the outcome of research in the prior year. Where would they participate? And I think this is part of this closing the loop, right?
Exactly.
So, yeah.
I think this is a really good point, because what is usually happening is that nurses get the request, put in this data, because this is for the research.
Right.
And then they put the data, and we know what comes in, comes out. So if we don't have a good data coming in, it's a question, what do you got from the research? What exactly are we saying? Quality of data coming in are immensely important, because we will do research and conclusions on something that is not based on the evidence. So being very proactive and including people to give it more time to understand, to comprehend, to include, eventually to tell them this is your work and this is where you helped. So kind of recognition, kind of explanation, giving that benefit of why did you collect this data, why did you work additional hours that might not be even paid or protected, but you did, you worked on this, and this is your result. This is where, as you said, your example, this is where it's come from you that we have a better outcomes for the patient. I just want to comment that I'm surprised because we are in the audience of Renal Research Institute, so everybody is here somehow connected to research. So people who never participated in the research project or once, I feel you, I know how it feels. It's always a bit of courage that needs to be taken, but I think the research is like chatting with a good friend. They can take you to unbelievable depth of the research and questions that are coming even more. So I suggest that we do the research.
I was also wondering about the answer once. I mean, I don't want, of course, to put anyone on the spot. There are several options here. Maybe it was just one opportunity and they grabbed it, or there was one opportunity, they took it, and they said, never, ever again. You know, I'd be really curious about that, and maybe after this meeting, during the break, those who said once, come over to chat. Who knows? What do you think, these ones?
I don't know, maybe just a lack of opportunity too, right? Maybe someone just said, like, I did it once, I liked it, but I've never had another opportunity to do it, which would be a shame, but that might be an opportunity for us to get those folks involved. But nonetheless, interesting. Yeah.
Okay, let's see what other question we had. Yeah, because we were already briefly talking about these roadblocks. What is the most relevant roadblock to the participation of nurses in research projects? Time constraints, lack of support from leadership, lack of research experience, or something else? Let's see.
It's interesting how it's moving. In fact, time constraint is something that is fixed. The lack of support and research experience is something that is now coming.
That time constraint bar can't get any more full.
Yeah, it's very clear. I mean, this is a pretty clear result, time constraints. And I remember in RI clinics, there were, the staffing ratio was a little bit higher because of research. So that there were Lisa would know what the ratio was back then and how it has changed, but it was higher because clinical research was so much at the forefront, and maybe this may have mitigated the time constraints. So, does this surprise you?
No, not at all. Does it surprise you? I mean, I don't think so. I think that's a lot of the feedback that we hear, and you could almost even put 1 and 2 together a little bit. So I'm sure some folks were kind of wrestling with it, but I do think it flips. And Marjelka, I'd love your thoughts on this. I do think sometimes that flips to it's leadership's responsibility then to determine if we're going to participate. We've got to make room, right? We've got to make the time for the teams. to be able to conduct the research and to conduct it responsibly so we get that good data because we make decisions based off that data. So I do think that's something that we've got to work with and determine how we can support leadership so we can give folks the time to do the research. What do you think?
Definitely. If we look in the workflow of the nurse in dialysis, and here in the US this is even more on the obesity side, there is more than 50 different tasks that the person needs to do around the patient. There is additional tasks that a clinic manager or a clinic nurse needs to do. It's a huge amount of task that needs to be done in that specific amount of time, which is making this time constraint really, really, really troubling. But this is why we are saying here, and I'm really saying out loud, as you did, the support of the leadership is something that is critical here. We need to say, okay, this kind of research is something that is important. Let's find a way how to protect this time that you will do on this. If this is not done, then we will come back to discussion about what the data is in. What do we put in that kind of research? So yes, it's very much in connection. I would not like to dismiss the lack of research experience because this is exactly what we talked about. If we know what is the benefit of doing the research, not because of the research, but because of the result at the end, it's something that can be engaging for the people. So it is all of the above, I would say, of this reason. Time, definitely, but if we support and if we find a way how to allow the space in time, then it could be something that we
I'm just wondering, lack of support from leadership, why do you think is that? Because there is no, because of financial constraints, or is it because the fear that the operations of a clinic may get distracted? Or just being so entrenched in a certain routine, or what do you think?
I will give you the example of one of the projects that we are doing. So we have the education for the clinic head nurses in specific countries, and we did request the protected time. So they have the luxury to say, I will learn for half an hour, do not disturb me. Do they do that? No. You know why? Because they feel responsible to have everything under control, that things are going right. So what they become is overwhelmed, even if you give them this. So we need to find how to do it differently. The leadership is saying this, but they cannot pull the people out of the job, saying, now you go out away and do this. But there is a problem of the leadership not understanding that it cannot fit all in one. You cannot put everything in.
Yeah. I think there's also maybe a little bit of a culture shift that has to happen, right? So to your point, leadership can sometimes provide the time, but the nurses feel like they are so attached to the patients, they have to be at the point of care all the time, right? So I do think there's a little bit of a culture, and I think it still goes back to we have to make sure that all of our clinicians understand the very important role they play in research, and that without them, we oftentimes don't get the perspective of the point of care, and it's so critical in many of the research projects. So I do think we have to I think maybe the culture plus the ability of the support, the spoken and unspoken support from leadership is important.
Yeah, the fact that something else was only, I think, 5% tells me that we really have captured the main reasons.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
Now, there is, of course, very good examples of successful participation of nurses in research. And let me just hand this over to Marjelka.
Yes, thank you very much. So quickly, just to give you the flavor of what has been done in terms of the research. So you will hear from João later on, but João and Ricardo started ideation of what of the vascular access we can do. What else is there? Is there anything that we can do differently? And it was 2012, so it was really a long time ago. And it took time until they understood how to do, what to do, where to do, what is the ethical committee, how many patients, whom to contact, where to go. And you see the timeline here presented. So what eventually has happened is the publication that is out in 2022 about the multiple single cannulation technique. But also there will be a big randomized control trial on MAST technique for prevalent and incident patient. That will get out, I think, 25 this year. It should be done. In kidney medicine, it's still unpublished, but it will be published soon. So this was a true research. This was definitely something that pulled them away from that bedside story and pushed them into the finding how they can do the research, what to do exactly. Okay, the next example is of a person who Adrian will speak about later on. This is the colleague of Adrian. Ruben had a personal interest in understanding the ultrasound cannulated technique, how to do, what to do, where to do. So he was researching, he was putting the knowledge into himself and looking how can it be done. That he eventually got as a consultant to European Nurse Association, and it was mentioned, this communication with the nurse associations, that he became the consultant for the vascular access. He also edited a book about the vascular access ultrasound guided vascular access. So that's a huge story about how nurse can be proactive and do the research and even do the publication that are really speaking volume. But also, at the end, what we did recently is that we merged these two projects together. So there was an education from Portugal going to Spain to do the education about the MAST technique. That was a part of Dan Ruben, who was included in the project. So what you have the example of how do we, with the evidence-based data and evidence-based research, we do a benefit for these patients. So what you see is that through the MAST cannulation technique and the ultrasound-guided cannulation, we created this beautiful reverse of bed area technique cannulation to something that is very good observed with ultrasound.
Those are great examples, right, of nurses seeing a challenge and a problem and tackling it with the research and also doing the publication, which is fantastic. They followed it end to end. That's great.
Yeah, so really thank you, Marjelka, and thank you, Trish, for this great discussion. And I think there will be ongoing discussion after, during the break or during a Q&A, but this was wonderful. And thank you for your participation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.